Hi there, and welcome to the start of another trading week. Let's see what's in store in this installment of Week Ahead. I'm joined by Joshua Mahony, market analyst with IG. So, Joshua, we have Federal Reserve voting member John Williams speaking in San Francisco today, while at the end of the week we'll have US non-farm payrolls. Do you think either of these events will give us clues regarding monetary policy outlook?
I think in terms of the speeches, some of the different members, we have a whole raft of them. We've also heard from Dudley today, who's spouted out the similar kind of lines that we've heard from Janet Yellen, really, and that is that he expects that we should be able to see some sort of hike within this year. But, these people aren't necessarily likely to tell us that we're not going to see a hike this year. We know that the aim is to do so. The aim was to do so in September, but there always seems to be something that gets in the way. So I guess the background to it is it's sort of twofold in terms of the elements that you would think would be the main determinants of whether we're going to see a hike or not. That would be the jobs market, which largely has been pretty good recently and would be relatively supportive of the idea that we might see a rate hike. And the other side is inflation. Now, inflation, we saw the core PCE number, which is the inflation reading that is used by the Federal Reserve, and it remained at 0.1. So hardly the kind of number that would spur them into deciding they needed to hike. And then the third spoke, I guess, to that wheel would be China. And China's not really showing any signs of improvement as of yet. So I don't really see that anything particularly is changing for the time being, apart from the fact that we've got these non-farms on Friday. So if we saw the non-farms or the whole jobs report, which arguably is the only part of that trilogy that's actually holding up anyway, if we saw it seriously outperform, then possibly this would make an impact and make people think that, yes, we are going to see something in October. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. I think that the core PCE number, if we'd seen a big spike in that, then that would have at least given us a little bit more confidence that possibly we were going to see something for the forthcoming meeting. But I think maybe the focus on this non-farms release is going to be more upon the fact that if the number's good, then we'll stay as we are, i.e. the jobs market remains supportive, the other two elements aren't. If the number's not good, then all of a sudden the idea of an October or even a December hike, feels like it's getting further and further away.
Speaking of China, this week we'll see the final manufacturing PMIs. After last week's preliminary data saw 6-year lows, what are we likely to see in this release?
Anytime that anyone's got too excited about a Chinese release and thought that, we're finally going to start seeing it rise, over recent months has been proven wrong. So my mindset is that we haven't seen any sort of indication that anything's going to improve. So whether the revised figures are particularly going to be revised lower or not, perhaps not. And of course, you usually get more volatility and more movement on those initial figures. But I think for the time being, despite the fact that the Chinese implemented a whole raft of measures, it remains to be the case that figures are coming out towards the downside. They're pointing towards continued slowdown. And over the weekend, we heard these Chinese industrial companies reporting profits that fell the most in 4 years. So, quite honestly, I don't remember people mentioning the profits of industrial companies. It feels like at the moment people are clutching at straws for any sort of Chinese reading for them to say, okay, well, it's changing for the better or for the worse. And for the time being, nothing's particularly improving. So I don't think that we're necessarily going to see any sort of change in terms of that similar outlook when we see the manufacturing PMI figure revised.
And Joshua, are there any other events this week that we haven't touched upon that you think our viewers should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, staying on the whole Chinese issue, we have on Thursday the Caixin manufacturing PMI reading, and that reading is more geared towards smaller firms, smaller and medium-sized businesses, as opposed to larger state firms that obviously are backed up to some extent by the government, and therefore, if there's a slowdown, the first companies to be feeling it are going to be the smaller firms. So the reading that we last saw was 47, and bear in mind that the sort of headline manufacturing number is 49.7. So there's some difference between the two. So a continued deterioration in terms of the Caixin number that you would think would lead the sort of headline number. So I think that's an important one. We've also got a handful of numbers coming out of Japan, which, given that many people are thinking there's no chance that they're going to be able to hit that 2% inflation target without ramping up QE at some point, it's always key to note exactly what direction those figures are going. And as it stands, those figures aren't particularly pointing towards anything other than the fact that they will need to ease again. So we've got retail sales, household spending, and unemployment rate coming out over Wednesday and Friday, and finally Eurozone CPI, which again people are now talking about, are they going to ramp up QE over in the Eurozone? I think for people who think that this one program is going to be the be-all and end-all and it's going to stay at that same rate that they first implemented it, I think it'll be foolhardy. So it's quite likely that at some point they would possibly raise it. Obviously CPI being a main determinant of their decision-making over at the ECB would be very interesting. Expected to come in at 0% from 0.1. So obviously if it dropped below that and we went into deflation, then that would really take the headlines.
Well, that's what to look out for this week. Make sure you're keeping up to date with the latest news and events by watching Dukascopy TV. Bye for now.